When you ask bass players throughout music history who their influences were, many, like Barry Oakley, Stanley Clarke, Tommy Shannon, and Sting, just to name a few, will always have Jack Bruce on their list. I think you can sum him up by saying he was such a vital piece of the 60s rock scene and its evolution. He was one of those players who led the way and opened the doors to the minds of the players who came up after him. But it goes even farther and deeper than that. Jack never slowed down and kept improving and innovating throughout his life. Now, Jack was a lot more than just a bass player. He was a multi-instrumentalist who had a great voice and songwriting abilities. His bass playing and vocals were brought to the light here in America with the rock group Cream, where you hear many stories about him and his two bandmates, guitarist Eric Clapton and drummer Ginger Baker, who Jack always had a love-hate relationship with. His final words to Ginger before his passing were quite shocking, to say the least. We'll cover that and a lot more of his life and career, especially the group Cream, here in this video. So stick around. He was born John Simon Asher Bruce in the city of Glasgow, Scotland, May 14, 1943. I was attracted to the bass when I was about 14, Jack said. The instrument was free at school, an old bass standing in the corner. Nobody wanted to learn it. They brought in a teacher for me, a good teacher, and he said, "You're not big enough yet. Your hands aren't big enough. You're not tall enough." So I took up the cello. He attended the Royal Scottish Academy of Music, to which he won a scholarship for cello and composition. He then left the academy at 16. Him and his teachers didn't see eye to eye, and Jack was ready to get out and start his musical journey in the world. "I could make a living out of music," Jack said. "I never thought I'd be famous. I was just undiscerning. If somebody asked me to play in a country and western band or a Scottish country dance group, I'd do it for the money and experience. It gave me a wider knowledge of the average rock star." In 1962, he joined Alexis Corner's Blues Incorporated, and then in 1963 he moved on to Graham Bond's organization, an underrated British R&B combo complete with B3 organ and horns. It was here Jack would work with and start his rocky relationship with drummer Ginger Baker. The story goes that Jack was fired from this group because he played too many high notes on the bass, and the band left it up to Ginger to do the dirty work. But Jack wouldn't leave, so Ginger pulled a knife on him. Jack would move on in 1965 to do a short stint with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. It was in this group he would meet and work a short time with Eric Clapton. By now, he was 22 years old and was becoming one of the best bassists around. He had moved on from the stand-up double bass. He was also playing some keyboards, harmonica, and taking on lead vocals. Next came some time and a few albums with Manfred Mann. I think Jack ended up leaving that group for a couple of reasons. One, he wanted to be involved doing more lead vocals, and when lead vocalist Paul Jones left, I think Jack really wanted to take his place. But that didn't happen. Mike Dabo, who replaced Manfred Mann's lead vocalist Paul Jones, told this story about Jack leaving the group. Mike said he picked up Jack with his car on the way to a Manfred session. Jack told him that his hiring indicated to him that he would have very few opportunities to sing lead and would rather quit and join up with Eric Clapton and Ginger Baker on a project they were starting. Now, right around this time, the Hollies recorded the Burt Bacharach's Hal David song After the Fox in September of 1966 with Jack on the electric bass. This was the theme song for the Peter Sellers film of the same name. But the time and opportunity was just right for Jack to take the plunge and rekindle his old love-hate relationship with Ginger Baker and put together a group that in a few short years would bring him out into the spotlight, especially here in America. That group was Cream. Ginger Baker, Jack Bruce, and Eric Clapton, three very talented musicians, together for a few short years, they recorded and performed on stage some of the most memorable music of late 60s rock and roll. Starting out, they were said to be the cream of the crop, which was eventually shortened to Cream. Although they were only to last as a group a little more than a couple of years, and releasing only 3 albums during that time together, they left a lasting impression on many of us. Before deciding upon Cream, the band considered calling themselves Sweet and Sour Rock and Roll. Of the trio, Clapton had the biggest reputation in England. However, he was all but unknown in the United States, having left the Yardbirds before For Your Love hit the American Top 10. The band made its unofficial debut at the Twisted Wheel in Manchester, England. Its official debut came 2 nights later at the 6th annual Windsor Jazz and Blues Festival. Being new and with few original songs to its credit, they performed covers of blues numbers they reworked, and from all accounts, the band was well received. It was during the early organization that they decided Bruce would serve as the group's lead vocalist. Clapton was still kind of shy about singing. He occasionally harmonized with Bruce, and in time took lead vocals on several Cream recordings. Cream's first album, Fresh Cream, was a mix of classic blues and blues-influenced originals, presented with hard-hitting arrangements. The album was a success and got the ball rolling, but it was their follow-up album at Atlantic Studios in New York, titled Disraeli Gears, that brought the group wide-scale popularity and fame. That album was recorded in May of 1967. It had Felix Pappalardi there producing, and also a fellow named Tom Dowd engineering the album. I feel they were very important to the success and busting Cream's sound out over here in America. Felix Pappalardi would later go on to produce, play bass, keyboards, and write songs and sing with the group Mountain featuring Leslie West. He was a big part of the Disraeli Gears album by producing and writing on a couple of the songs along with his wife Gail Collins. There are a few stories here that I won't go deep into as they'll get us off track, but the importance of this album by Cream had a huge effect on Felix and especially Leslie West, who said that going to hear Cream in 1967 in New York gave him the inspiration, or I think as he put it, kick in the ass needed to further his musical journey. Sadly, Felix was shot and killed later in 1983 at 43 years old by his songwriting partner and wife, Gail. If you want to know more about Felix and Leslie West, I have a video on the channel with a lot more information. I'll put a link up here and in the video description. Now let's get back to Cream. So we have these 5 guys in the studio working together. We got Tom Dowd and Felix Pappalardi and Cream. Great musical talent, songwriting and production. And they would all go on to record Cream's 3rd album, Wheels of Fire, which was a double album. It reached number 3 in the United Kingdom and number 1 in the United States, Canada, and Australia, becoming the world's first platinum-selling double album. Just before Wheels of Fire was to be released, the group's manager, Robert Stigwood, announced that the group would disband after a farewell tour and a final concert at the Royal Albert Hall in November. Ginger Baker says of the band, "The onstage chemistry with Cream was staggering. It was as if someone else had taken over," he explains. "You're not conscious of playing, you're listening to this fantastic sound that you're a part of, and your part is just happening. It was a gift, and we 3 had it in abundance." How great of a drummer was Ginger Baker? I would guess that would depend on how you look at his playing. He was very influential to many. Neil Peart of Rush, Chad Smith, the Chili Peppers, Frank Beard of ZZ Top, and many more all speak highly of him and how he influenced them. As far as a person, I think this probably hurt his reputation a lot. It wasn't only Jack Bruce he didn't get along with. He was, for lack of a better term, pretty much an asshole and spoke what was on his mind. He was addicted to heroin for years, but even after he kicked the habit, he still came off like an asshole. I guess the thing that got to me most was after John Bonham, the great drummer of Led Zeppelin, died. Ginger said in an interview that John Bonham couldn't swing a sack of shit. Talk like that still doesn't take away from his talent. He was a great jazz-style drummer, and with those African beats he created his own unique style. After Cream, and then playing with Eric Clapton and Steve Winwood in Blind Faith for a year, he went off to Africa for a time. I guess the one thing Ginger was quoted as saying that was pretty good was, "Cream was a jazz band. We just didn't tell Eric." Peter Edward Baker, known to all of us as Ginger, died of complications of COPD in the UK on October 6, 2019. And although Cream sold over 40 million albums, after his death, his family revealed he was living on £150 a week state pension. Eric Clapton's name always comes up when there's talk of great guitarists. Eric's life was also plagued with heroin and alcohol abuse. He was an alcoholic and addicted to heroin early in his career, and it wasn't long before his addictions affected it. Clapton passed out on stage during George Harrison's concert for Bangladesh in 1972. Even when he was strong enough for overcoming drug addiction, Clapton still had his battles with alcohol, as many like him do. But by 1990, he got the help he needed and has been clean ever since. Eric is the only member of Cream still alive today, and the only member to be elected to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as an individual. The group Cream was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1993. They hadn't played together in 25 years, and when they kicked into Sunshine of Your Love, it sounded just like they did back in the day. Amazing chemistry between them. They got together for really the last time in 2005 and did a short tour and recorded that live album. Again, the old chemistry was there. Jack Bruce was still recovering from his liver transplant, and him and Ginger renewed their feud pretty quickly, so the tour didn't last very long. But then again, I don't think it was ever in the stars for Cream to last very long anyhow. Jack Bruce was known for his innovative bass playing style, incorporating elements of jazz and blues into his rock music. His melodic bass lines set him apart in the rock scene. After Cream disbanded in 1968, Jack had a successful solo career. He released several solo albums, showcasing his versatility as a musician and songwriter. He also collaborated with various artists across different genres, demonstrating his ability to adapt to the diverse musical styles. His collaborations range from jazz musicians like Tony Williams to rock acts like Ringo Starr. He also played with guitarists such as Leslie West, Rory Gallagher, and Robin Trower, just to name a few. I guess my favorite Jack Bruce music was when him and Robin Trower teamed up and did that 7 Moons album, and the live performance they put on was great. Jack Bruce, Robin Trower, and drummer Gary Husband sounded fantastic. The performance is on YouTube, and I'll leave a link in the description below this video. Check it out. Jack Bruce had his own problems with heroin and alcohol, as many did from that era. He finally got clinical help to kick it. But even after receiving a liver transplant in 2004, he would end up passing away from liver disease in October of 2014 in England. He was 71 years old. There's no doubt, like Baker, Jack Bruce was an innovator on his instrument. He could also play piano and harmonica. His vocal was always top-notch. Jack Bruce left behind a legacy as one of the most influential bassists in rock history. And yes, him and Ginger Baker would fight and argue until his dying day. But as Jack put it, we were just like brothers. One minute we'd love each other, and the next minute we'd be in a fist fight. And a final story about those two. I have no clue if it's true or not, but here it is. The story goes, when Jack was a few hours from death in 2014, he phoned up Ginger to say goodbye. When he called his ex-bandmate, he told him, "I'm dying, Ginger. Fuck you." Then he hung up the phone. Now, Baker tried to call him back several times, of course, but Bruce wouldn't pick up. Jack Bruce said Ginger always wanted the last word. Well, this time he wouldn't get it. Jack Bruce was known for a very wicked sense of humor, so maybe this story is true. If you enjoyed this video on Jack Bruce and Cream, I'll put another one up right here that I think you might like. Don't forget to subscribe, and thanks a lot for watching.